Carla had always been the kind of woman who carried a quiet strength. At 68, she moved through her days with the calm rhythm of someone who had seen enough seasons to know life's subtle patterns. She lived alone in her small, sunlit apartment, filled with the soft hum of old jazz records and the scent of lavender from a tiny garden on her balcony. Friends often described her as graceful, attentive, and meticulous, someone who took care of her health with quiet diligence. Yet over the past few months, an unshakable weariness had begun to creep into her mornings, subtle at first, like a shadow brushing across the edges of her day. It wasn't one sudden event, but a series of small misalignments. Her hands tingled in the morning, her legs felt unusually weak, and the spring in her step seemed to falter in ways she could no longer ignore. The day the doctor delivered the news, Carla felt as though the world had paused for a moment. Her blood tests, though not catastrophic, hinted at deficiencies that she hadn't noticed, nutrients slipping quietly from her body, invisible yet insidious. She remembered sitting in the sterile white room, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead mingling with the soft voice of the nurse explaining each result. At first, she tried to dismiss the concern, attributing it to age or the occasional fatigue that she had always managed with a good night's sleep. But deep inside, a familiar anxiety began to stir, the kind that had quietly accompanied her through other moments of uncertainty in life, the sort that whispers, "You can't ignore this." In the following days, Carla began to notice the small, relentless ways her body was signaling for attention. Her morning walks felt heavier, her favorite recipes no longer brought the same vitality she once enjoyed, and the energy she had taken for granted seemed to retreat just a little further each day. She found herself staring at the rows of vegetables at the market, unsure which choices would truly nourish her body. It wasn't just about eating, it was about understanding her body's quiet language, the signals she had overlooked. There was a pang of regret, yes, but also a quiet determination that this was not the way her story would end. One afternoon, while arranging her herbs on the balcony, Carla noticed a vibrant cluster of okra at a nearby stand. The green pods seemed almost to glow under the afternoon sun, their texture crisp and inviting. Something about them called to her, not just the promise of flavor, but the whisper of vitality she craved. She remembered an old friend mentioning that okra was sometimes called green ginseng, rich in nutrients that could quietly restore the body. The idea felt almost magical, a bridge between her desire to reclaim her health and the simple act of choosing food thoughtfully. That day, she carried the okra home as though it were a small talisman, a symbol of the journey she was about to begin. Carla's kitchen became her quiet laboratory. Each morning, she approached it with a reverence she hadn't known she possessed, gently washing the okra with care, mindful of every detail. The ritual of cleaning and preparing each pod transformed into a meditation, a way to reconnect with her body's needs. She marveled at the tiny hairs on the surface, the way a gentle rub could coax them away, revealing the tender green within. It was in these small acts that she began to feel a sense of control returning, a reclaiming of her own well-being that no doctor's words alone could grant. The process was slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial, and yet it brought a quiet satisfaction, a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in months. As she worked, Carla reflected on the years that had led her here. She thought of her late husband, who had always encouraged her to take joy in simple things, and of her grandchildren, who loved the meals she prepared with care and patience. The thought of nourishing her body in the same way she nourished those she loved gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that health was not just a matter of pills or supplements, it was a story written in the rhythm of her daily choices, in the love and attention she poured into the food she ate. Steaming the okra carefully, she felt a connection not only to her body but to a lineage of women who had quietly cared for themselves through mindful, nurturing routines. Carla discovered that there was more to the okra than she had imagined. As she cut the pods into even pieces, the emerald green cross-sections revealed a silky, almost crystalline mucus that shimmered in the sunlight. It seemed a secret treasure, a concentrated essence of the vegetable's vitality, rich in polysaccharides and proteins that promised quiet nourishment. With each careful cut, she felt as if she were unlocking a hidden reservoir of strength, a gift tucked within nature's design. She marveled at the texture, the subtle aroma, and the promise held in these tiny pods, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with hunger, but everything to do with possibility. In the evenings, Carla would sit at her small table, the kitchen bathed in the soft glow of lamplight, and savor the meals she had prepared with mindful attention. Steamed okra with delicate eggs became her favorite, each bite a comforting combination of flavor and reassurance. The slimy texture that once seemed unappealing now felt like a gentle, nourishing caress, a reminder that the body thrived when treated with patience and care. With every meal, she felt a growing connection to her own vitality, a sense that she could influence her health in profound and tangible ways. What had begun as a quiet ritual of necessity slowly became a source of joy, a daily celebration of what her body could do when respected. By the end of each week, Carla began to notice subtle but undeniable changes. Her hands tingled less, her steps felt lighter, and the exhaustion that had weighed on her mornings began to lift. More than physical improvement, there was an emotional transformation, a quiet reassurance that she was capable of guiding her own journey toward health. She realized that nourishment was not just a matter of vitamins or minerals, but of mindfulness, intention, and respect for the delicate balance of her body. Each meal became an affirmation, each careful preparation a declaration that life could still be vibrant, even in the later chapters. Through Carla's eyes, the world seemed to shift in small but meaningful ways. Ordinary foods became vessels of healing, ordinary routines became rituals of care, and the simple act of preparing a meal became an act of self-love. She understood that the journey to wellness was not a sprint, but a series of deliberate, thoughtful steps, each one building upon the last. And as she prepared another batch of steamed okra one bright morning, she smiled quietly, feeling a sense of triumph that had nothing to do with grand gestures and everything to do with gentle, consistent care. In that moment, Carla was not just cooking, she was reclaiming her strength, her independence, and her hope. Carla woke to the sound of her alarm, though the usual comfort of her familiar morning routine felt strangely distant. The sunlight filtering through her curtains seemed harsher than usual, casting long shadows across the floor that she could feel in her bones. It was not the first time she had felt fatigue creeping into her days, but this morning it carried a sharper edge, a sense that something had shifted within her body. As she swung her legs over the side of the bed, a twinge ran through her knees and her hands tingled faintly as they brushed against the quilt. For a moment, she paused, trying to steady herself, the realization settling quietly. She could no longer take her body's resilience for granted. She shuffled to the bathroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror, tracing the lines that had deepened subtly over the years. Her eyes, once bright and sharp, seemed dimmed by the persistent haze of fatigue. Carla touched her face gently, as if hoping her hands could smooth away the invisible weight she carried. A small wave of anxiety stirred. She had always prided herself on attentiveness to her health, careful routines, and mindfulness in what she ate and how she moved. And yet, here she was, confronted with evidence that time and circumstance had begun to overtake her usual vigilance. Her thoughts spiraled briefly into fear, wondering whether these were signs of something serious or simply the quiet wear of age, but she quickly grounded herself with a slow, deliberate breath. Breakfast was no longer a casual affair. The usual toast and tea seemed insufficient, almost unsatisfying in a way she could not articulate. Carla moved through her kitchen with a mix of determination and uncertainty, pulling out the vegetables she had bought the day before. The okra, still fresh and glistening with dew from the market, caught her eye. She remembered the brief conversation with her friend who had mentioned its restorative properties, though Carla had never given it much thought until now. Today, she realized she was ready to pay attention, not just to her body's signals, but to the subtle wisdom hidden in her choices. Every careful movement, from washing the pods to laying them out on a cutting board, felt significant, almost ceremonial. As she worked, memories surfaced unbidden. Her younger years spent tending gardens, her mother's kitchen filled with the aroma of herbs, the comfort of cooking for family and friends. She thought of her grandchildren, who had always marveled at the meals she prepared, and a quiet longing welled up within her, a desire to feel strong enough to remain present in their lives for many more years. Cooking was never merely about sustenance for Carla. It was a language of care, a way of expressing love that went beyond words. And now, as she approached the okra, it seemed as though she were writing a new chapter in that language, one that included herself as a recipient of care, not just a giver. The first cut into the okra revealed the familiar glistening interior, the tiny seeds aligned like little pearls within each pod. Carla studied them, marveling at the simple complexity of such a humble vegetable. It seemed almost miraculous that something so small could hold the potential to nurture and sustain. She remembered reading in passing that okra could help with inflammation and blood sugar balance, though she did not focus on the science. Rather, she felt the intuitive pull to include it in her diet mindfully. She chopped carefully, each slice a deliberate act, her movements precise and unhurried. In this ritual, she began to feel a small but distinct sense of agency, a return of control that the morning's fatigue had threatened to steal from her. As the okra steamed gently over the simmering water, Carla settled at her table with a cup of tea, feeling the warmth seep slowly into her hands. She reflected on the subtle changes in her body, the morning tingling in her fingers, the stiffness in her knees, the inexplicable weariness, and allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She admitted to herself softly that she had perhaps taken her vitality for granted. The years of independence, the pride in being self-sufficient, had lulled her into complacency, and now her body was whispering reminders that it too required attention and care. But alongside the vulnerability was also a sense of quiet determination, a willingness to engage with her health in a way she had not previously considered. Lunch was an unhurried affair, the okra paired with a simple scramble of eggs, seasoned with a pinch of sea salt and a dash of pepper. Carla savored each bite slowly, paying attention to the textures and subtle flavors, noting how her body responded. There was a softness in her stomach, a gentle warmth, as though the food was quietly settling into her system and working in ways she could not yet articulate. The experience was meditative, a stark contrast to the hurried meals she had sometimes consumed while distracted by errands or phone calls. Today, she was fully present, and the act of nourishing herself carried an almost spiritual satisfaction. By mid-afternoon, Carla felt a subtle shift in energy. The tingling in her hands had lessened, replaced by a gentle alertness, and the heaviness in her legs seemed slightly diminished. She walked to her balcony, the sun warm on her face, and breathed in deeply, noticing the way her lungs expanded fully, a rhythm she had perhaps forgotten to appreciate. The city beyond her window hummed with life, but within her apartment there was a quiet sense of accomplishment, as though the small acts she had taken had created a ripple of strength throughout her being. In that moment, she felt a renewed bond with her body, a fragile but growing trust that her choices could indeed shape her health. Later, she sat in her favorite chair, reflecting on the morning and early afternoon, and felt a growing sense of curiosity. How had she overlooked these small signs? How many other overlooked habits could be subtly undermining her vitality? She realized that this was not a moment of shame or fear, but an invitation to pay closer attention, to explore gently, and to allow herself the patience to make incremental, lasting changes. The day had started with fatigue and uncertainty, yet here she was, feeling a small but significant flicker of hope. Carla understood, in that quiet clarity, that the journey ahead would not be marked by dramatic shifts overnight, but by the attentive, loving actions she repeated day after day. Evening arrived, and Carla prepared a light dinner, mindful of her body's cues and responses. She reflected on the transformation she had experienced within a single day, the subtle reclaiming of energy, the attentive engagement with her body, the quiet joy of nourishing herself. She made a mental note to continue this path, not out of obligation or fear, but out of respect for her own strength and life. The first steps had been taken, tentative but purposeful, and she felt a profound gratitude for the opportunity to guide her own well-being. In this new awareness, Carla found a sense of empowerment she had long forgotten, and a quiet promise to herself to embrace the journey ahead, fully and with care. The following morning, Carla awoke with a sense that yesterday had planted a seed she hadn't fully realized. Her body no longer felt heavy in the same way, though the faint stiffness in her knees reminded her that change would be gradual. She stretched gently, savoring the simple motions, fingers unfurling, shoulders lifting, toes brushing against the soft rug, and noticed a quiet awareness settling over her mind. There was a clarity, subtle but undeniable, as though the fog of fatigue had thinned slightly, giving her space to breathe and think. The morning sunlight danced across the kitchen floor again, but this time it seemed almost celebratory, as if acknowledging her renewed attention to herself. Carla moved through her morning with ritualistic care, selecting ingredients for her breakfast with thought rather than habit. Spinach caught her eye, its deep green leaves glistening with moisture. She remembered reading somewhere that greens could gently support circulation and overall vitality. Today, she didn't think about nutrients or charts. She simply thought about color, texture, and freshness. She washed each leaf slowly, cradling them in her hands as if recognizing the gift they offered. Cooking had become more than a routine. It had become a meditation, a practice of noticing, of honoring the small details she had previously overlooked. As she prepared the scrambled eggs with the spinach, Carla reflected on the subtle shifts she had felt the day before. The tingling in her hands had eased, her steps felt less laborious, and she had a lightness in her chest that she hadn't felt in months. It was a quiet victory, almost invisible to an outsider, yet monumental in her own perception. She allowed herself a small smile, acknowledging that progress didn't have to be loud or dramatic to be meaningful. In this quiet acknowledgement, she felt the beginnings of a new relationship with her body, a willingness to listen, to respond, and to act with patience rather than urgency. Later that morning, Carla received a call from her daughter, who asked about her health. The conversation was gentle, caring, filled with small questions and observations. Carla spoke about her fatigue, her tingling fingers, and her renewed attention to what she ate. She mentioned the okra and spinach, almost shyly, as if admitting to herself that she had finally taken the first steps toward caring for her own well-being. Her daughter's encouragement was warm, filled with empathy and subtle excitement. "I'm proud of you," she said, and Carla felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of gratitude and reassurance that she was not alone in this journey. By mid-morning, Carla decided to take a short walk outside. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers and distant rain. Each step felt deliberate. She noticed the way her feet connected with the earth, how her legs responded with gentle strength, how the rhythm of her breathing settled into a comforting cadence. She passed familiar neighbors and smiled, noting the small interactions that often went unnoticed in her previous routines. Today, every detail mattered: the curve of a tree branch, the hum of distant traffic, the flutter of birds overhead. Carla realized that awareness itself was nourishing, that attention to life's minutiae could bring both joy and a subtle vitality she had forgotten existed. As she returned home, Carla's thoughts drifted to her long-standing habits, the small indulgences and overlooked routines that had quietly shaped her health over the years. She thought about the late-night snacks, the cups of tea taken too close to bedtime, the times she had ignored minor aches and pains. There was no guilt in her reflection, only a gentle acknowledgement that the past had shaped the present, and the present could shape the future. She felt a growing curiosity about how her choices today could ripple forward, how mindful attention could cultivate resilience over time. The act of noticing had become, in itself, a form of nourishment. Lunch was quiet, simple, and thoughtful. Carla combined quinoa with roasted vegetables, the colors vivid and inviting. Each bite was savored slowly, allowing the flavors to unfold and her body to respond. She noticed warmth spreading through her chest, the gentle settling of energy, the subtle strengthening of muscles that had felt slack in the mornings past. It was not dramatic, not immediate, but cumulative, a quiet affirmation that her body was receptive, that her small efforts were meaningful. Carla realized that transformation didn't have to announce itself with fireworks. It could whisper softly, coaxing her toward health with subtle, persistent encouragement. In the afternoon, Carla took a moment to sit by the window and journal her experiences. She wrote about the tingling that had lessened, the renewed energy, and the feelings of pride and curiosity that now accompanied her routines. She reflected on the relationship between her mind and body, recognizing that attention, care, and patience were as critical as any dietary change. Her thoughts wandered gently to her grandchildren, imagining moments of play and laughter that she would now approach with more energy, more presence, more vitality. She allowed herself to imagine a future where she could fully inhabit each day, savoring both small joys and profound connections with the people she loved most. Evening approached, and Carla prepared her dinner with the same careful attention she had applied to breakfast and lunch. She included a small portion of salmon, recalling her late mother's words about the nourishing power of fish. As she cooked, she allowed herself to marvel at the simple alchemy of ingredients transforming into meals that were both comforting and life-giving. The kitchen filled with warmth and aroma, carrying an almost tangible sense of progress. Carla realized that her journey was not just about adding new foods or routines, but about cultivating an attentive, loving presence in every act of daily life. Each chop, each stir, each bite was part of a larger narrative of transformation, one she was beginning to inhabit fully. After dinner, Carla sat in her favorite armchair, reflecting on the subtle awakening she had experienced over these past 2 days. Her body felt lighter, her mind sharper, her spirit gently buoyed by the awareness that change, while gradual, was indeed possible. She allowed herself a quiet gratitude for the lessons already learned, that small, deliberate actions could restore vitality, that awareness itself was a gift, and that caring for oneself was both a responsibility and a pleasure. As night fell, she prepared for bed with the intention to continue nurturing herself, knowing that each day offered another opportunity to deepen this newfound attentiveness and strength. As she drifted toward sleep, Carla's thoughts lingered on the promise of tomorrow. She felt a sense of anticipation, not anxious or restless, but gentle and hopeful, as though she were standing at the edge of a path that could lead to greater health, resilience, and joy. The subtle awakening she had experienced was more than physical. It was emotional, intellectual, and spiritual, an integrated recognition that she could shape her own well-being through mindful, loving attention. And in that quiet, reflective moment, Carla realized that she had taken her first real steps toward a life that honored both her body and her spirit, a life she was now determined to live fully, attentively, and gracefully. The following morning, Carla woke with a faint sense of unease she couldn't immediately place. Her muscles ached in unfamiliar ways, and a subtle dizziness made her take a moment before stepping out of bed. She sat on the edge, feeling her pulse, noticing the faint tremor in her hands. It was not dramatic, but enough to rattle the fragile sense of progress she had been cultivating over the past 2 days. A quiet worry settled in her chest, a whisper of doubt that perhaps the journey she had just begun might be more complicated than she imagined. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror caught her attention. Eyes slightly puffy, a crease in her forehead that seemed sharper than yesterday, lips pressed together in an unconscious frown. She had hoped that embracing small changes, walking, mindful eating, attention to body, would bring immediate relief, and in many ways they had. But now there was a new challenge, subtle yet undeniable, reminding her that health was never a straight path. Carla allowed herself a deep breath, acknowledging the fear without letting it dominate. She whispered to her reflection, almost as if reassuring a dear friend, "This is part of it. I'll figure it out." Breakfast was slower that morning. Carla poured a small bowl of oats, sprinkled with cinnamon and a handful of blueberries. She moved methodically, appreciating the texture and aroma, but her mind was restless, replaying each ache, each flicker of dizziness, each pang of uncertainty. Her cat brushed against her ankles, breaking her thoughts and drawing her back to the present. The tiny, everyday presence reminded her that even amid unease, life continued in its simple rhythms. Breeze through the window, hum of the kettle, sunlight striking the counter. There was comfort in these small constants, grounding her in a reality she could influence and care for. Mid-morning brought a phone call from her physician. Carla hesitated, fingering the phone as anxiety rose. The doctor's voice was calm, warm, and steady, a gentle anchor. He asked detailed questions about her symptoms, listened carefully to her descriptions, and reassured her that subtle setbacks were common during early lifestyle changes. "Carla," he said, "your body is adjusting. Sometimes progress isn't linear, but what you're doing, eating consciously, walking, staying aware, matters more than perfection." His words were a balm, softening the edge of fear and replacing it with cautious hope. Carla realized how crucial guidance could be, not as a set of instructions, but as a steadying presence in her journey. The rest of the morning, Carla reflected on her relationship with challenge. She thought about past difficulties, small and large, that had seemed insurmountable at the time but had eventually shaped her resilience. She remembered her first piano recital at 14, hands trembling, heart racing, yet the performance had taught her patience, focus, and the quiet thrill of accomplishment. She thought about the long hours caring for her mother, the endless laundry, meals, and doctor visits, and how those experiences had built a fortitude she had often forgotten existed. This morning, she recognized that health challenges were another form of growth, another way to honor her capacity for persistence and grace. By late morning, Carla decided to take a short walk, despite the residual dizziness. Each step was deliberate. She focused on her footing, the sensation of her shoes on the path, and the subtle sway of trees in the breeze. Passing familiar faces, she offered gentle smiles, noticing how acknowledgement of others mirrored back into her own sense of calm. She realized that movement, even small, could serve as reassurance, a tangible act that her body was willing to engage, willing to cooperate even when uncertainty lingered. It was an intimate dialogue, a negotiation of trust between mind and body. Lunch was mindful but cautious. Carla prepared a light salad, adding avocado slices and cherry tomatoes, drizzling a touch of olive oil. She chewed slowly, noting textures and flavors, and allowed her body to guide her appetite rather than rushing through the meal. With each bite, she felt a subtle restoration, a tiny energy returning to her chest and shoulders. She considered the possibility that challenges weren't failures but signposts, directions indicating that she needed to approach herself with gentleness and care. The notion shifted her perspective, transforming worry into curiosity about what her body was truly communicating. The afternoon brought a visitor, her neighbor Helen, who had walked with Carla in the park before. Helen noticed the subtle shift in Carla's posture, the slight tightness around her shoulders, and immediately asked if she was all right. Carla shared her morning's unease and the doctor's advice, and Helen nodded knowingly. "I've been there," she said softly. "Sometimes progress comes with little setbacks, but notice how much you've gained already. You're paying attention, you're making changes, and that counts for more than you realize." Carla felt a wave of relief, an affirmation that she was not alone, and that connection could serve as an additional layer of support in her journey. Evening approached, and Carla's resolve began to solidify. She prepared a simple dinner, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, a small serving of brown rice. As she cooked, she allowed herself to reflect on the morning's lessons, that care, patience, and self-awareness were just as vital as movement and nutrition, that small discomforts were not defeats but invitations to learn, and that the journey of health was intimate, personal, and often unpredictable. She set the table, poured a small glass of water, and ate slowly, savoring each bite, noticing how her body responded with gratitude even in its vulnerability. After dinner, Carla sat quietly by the window, watching the sky shift from soft amber to deep indigo. She thought about the path ahead, understanding that setbacks were part of a larger narrative, not interruptions of it. She reflected on the importance of listening, not judging, and of responding with care rather than impatience. Her body's subtle signals were messages, not reprimands. Each ache, each tremor, each dizzy spell was a conversation she was now learning to engage with, gently and attentively. Before bed, Carla took a brief moment to journal, writing down the events, sensations, and reflections of the day. She noted the discomfort, but also the lessons, the support, the quiet victories of mindful eating, small walks, and the warmth of connection. As she closed her journal, a gentle calm settled over her. She understood that health was not a race, but a dialogue, an ongoing conversation between her body, her mind, and the world around her. With this perspective, even the day's challenges became a source of growth, not fear. As she lay down to sleep, Carla felt a renewed sense of determination. The dizziness and aches had not vanished, but they had become part of a story she was now willing to tell herself with patience and compassion. She thought of the days ahead as pages yet unwritten, filled with opportunities to listen, care, and nurture. In that quiet moment, she realized that every setback, every subtle challenge was a stepping stone, leading her toward a deeper understanding of herself, her body, and the delicate, rewarding process of transformation. The following morning greeted Carla with a surprising lightness. After a restless night of reflection, her body felt subtly stronger, her movements more coordinated, and even the lingering dizziness seemed gentler. She noticed the difference immediately as she stretched in her bedroom, feeling her muscles respond with newfound elasticity. The small triumph filled her chest with warmth, not triumph in a grand sense, but in the quiet, intimate acknowledgement that she was adjusting, learning, and progressing in ways that mattered deeply. This tiny victory, almost imperceptible to anyone else, reminded her that transformation was rarely dramatic. Often it was measured in the delicate shifts she could feel only in herself. Carla dressed slowly, savoring each garment's texture and fit. She chose a soft, sky blue sweater, one that brushed against her arms with comforting familiarity, and paired it with pants that allowed her full range of motion. As she moved through her apartment, she noticed subtle changes, the way her feet felt grounded on the carpet, the gentle sway of her arms as she carried her coffee mug, the slight, confident tilt of her chin in the mirror. These small moments of awareness brought a sense of control she hadn't realized she was missing. It was as though her body had begun speaking a language she was finally learning to understand. After breakfast, Carla decided to take a slightly longer walk than usual, venturing down the familiar neighborhood streets with a renewed curiosity. Each step was deliberate, conscious, and meditative. She observed the delicate patterns of sunlight on the pavement, the flutter of leaves in the morning breeze, and the distant laughter of children playing. In the midst of these ordinary scenes, she felt a profound appreciation for her surroundings and a subtle excitement for the day's possibilities. Her steps, once hesitant and cautious, now carried a quiet confidence, a rhythm that reflected both body and mind learning to synchronize in gentle harmony. During her walk, Carla noticed a small community garden tucked between two buildings. She had passed it many times before, but had never ventured inside. Something compelled her this morning, a quiet curiosity, a sense that exploration might reveal something new. She pushed open the gate, and the air smelled of rich soil and fresh greenery. Rows of vegetables and herbs stretched before her: kale, spinach, tomatoes, fragrant basil, and rosemary. A small sign identified each plant, inviting her to touch, smell, and engage. Carla's heart lifted. The garden felt like a secret space for growth, both literal and metaphorical. As she wandered through the rows, Carla found herself drawn to a patch of leafy greens, the sunlight catching on each dewdrop, making them sparkle like tiny gems. She bent down, brushing her fingers over the leaves, and felt an immediate connection to the living vibrancy of the plants. In that simple act, she discovered an unexpected joy, the realization that food could be more than sustenance. It could be an intimate, interactive experience that nourished her body and her spirit. She imagined incorporating fresh greens into her meals, each bite carrying the energy of the sun, the soil, and the care that had nurtured them. Later, Carla returned home, inspired to experiment in her kitchen. She prepared a small salad using the fresh produce she had bought the day before, adding a handful of leafy greens, cherry tomatoes, a drizzle of olive oil, and a sprinkle of nuts. The colors, textures, and aromas were vivid and inviting. She sat by the window, allowing sunlight to warm her face as she ate slowly, savoring every bite. Each mouthful seemed to carry a subtle vitality, awakening senses she had almost forgotten. Crispness on the tongue, subtle sweetness of tomatoes, the earthy richness of greens. Her body responded with a gentle surge of energy, an almost imperceptible feeling of lightness and ease. In the afternoon, Carla reflected on the morning's walk and culinary experiment. She realized that transformation was as much about discovery as discipline. It wasn't simply following instructions or adhering to routines, it was engaging with her body and environment in ways that invited curiosity, joy, and connection. The garden had offered her more than food, it had provided a sense of wonder and exploration, a reminder that growth often occurred in spaces she hadn't expected. She felt a quiet excitement for what tomorrow might bring, knowing that even small discoveries could yield profound effects over time. Carla's neighbor, Helen, stopped by in the late afternoon, carrying a small bundle of fresh herbs from her own garden. Helen noticed the slight glow in Carla's expression, the lightness in her posture, and the way she spoke with newfound enthusiasm about greens and salads. "You seem different today," Helen observed, smiling. "There's a brightness in your eyes." Carla laughed softly, feeling seen and acknowledged. "I think it's the garden," she said. "Something about touching the plants, seeing them grow. It reminds me that change can be beautiful, not just challenging." Helen nodded, understanding the sentiment deeply. Evening arrived with a gentle calm, and Carla prepared a light dinner, incorporating more of the greens she had discovered. She marinated a small piece of salmon, roasted some root vegetables, and served the meal with a side of freshly harvested spinach and arugula. Each bite was intentional, enjoyed slowly, and accompanied by mindful breaths. She reflected on the small triumphs of the day, the longer walk, the engagement with the garden, the joy of preparing and eating vibrant food. These moments, she realized, were building a new relationship with her body, one based on trust, attention, and gentle encouragement rather than criticism or fear. After dinner, Carla took a quiet moment to journal. writing down the events of the day, her observations, and the subtle shifts in energy and mood she had noticed. She described the pleasure of discovery, the gentle thrill of success, and the peace of connecting with her surroundings. Her reflections were intimate, almost like letters to herself, reminding her of the journey's beauty and the importance of noticing small victories. With each word, she reinforced a narrative of progress, hope, and patient curiosity, a story that was uniquely hers, unfolding in real time. Before bed, Carla took a few minutes to meditate, focusing on her breath, the sensations in her body, and the gratitude she felt for the day's discoveries. The small triumphs, the vivid experiences, and the gentle awareness of her own resilience created a profound sense of satisfaction. She understood that change was incremental and that each day offered opportunities for growth, insight, and renewal. With this realization, she allowed herself to drift into sleep with a heart lighter than it had been in months, carrying a quiet anticipation for the next day's journey. As the night deepened, Carla's thoughts lingered on the idea that transformation could be both practical and poetic. It was in the tangible actions, walking, eating, observing, but also in the intangible, the curiosity, joy, and connection that made these actions meaningful. She realized that the journey of health and vitality was not merely about avoiding illness, but about cultivating a life rich with attention, engagement, and delight. This understanding settled gently over her like a soft blanket, wrapping her in a sense of peace and empowerment she had long forgotten. Just when Carla began to feel the gentle momentum of her progress, a subtle unease crept into her routine. One morning, she awoke with a stiffness in her knees that hadn't been there before, a reminder that her body was still navigating the fragility of age. As she swung her legs over the side of the bed, the dull ache pulsed insistently, and she felt a flash of frustration. "Not now," she whispered to herself, her voice barely above a murmur. The setback felt discouraging, a sudden disruption to the small victories she had begun to savor. Her body, it seemed, had its own agenda, one that refused to align perfectly with her intentions. Despite the discomfort, Carla insisted on moving gently through her morning. She sipped her herbal tea, letting its warmth settle into her stomach and ease some of the tension. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden light through the window, painting her living room with a quiet promise. She closed her eyes and breathed slowly, attempting to center herself, to acknowledge the setback without letting it define the day. The pain persisted, but her mind reminded her of the progress she had made, the small triumphs of discovery, the mindful meals, the invigorating walks. This awareness helped her to meet the discomfort with patience rather than despair. Later that day, Carla decided to test her resilience by taking a short walk to the nearby park. Each step was cautious, deliberate, and slightly uneven, yet she felt a curious mixture of determination and humility. The ache in her knees was a constant reminder, a whisper that she could not ignore, but the fresh air and sunlight offered a counterbalance of vitality. Birds flitted between branches, and the scent of damp earth and grass filled her senses. Even with physical limitations, she could experience the world with clarity, noticing colors, textures, and sounds that often went overlooked. It was a lesson in acceptance, the idea that growth included setbacks, and setbacks were not failures, but moments requiring attention, care, and adaptation. Carla's neighbor, Helen, noticed her limping slightly as she passed the garden and offered a concerned smile. "Everything all right, Carla?" Helen asked softly, adjusting the basket of herbs she carried. Carla smiled faintly, appreciative of the recognition. "Just some aches," she replied. "Nothing I can't handle." Helen nodded, sensing both Carla's strength and vulnerability, and suggested some gentle stretches she had found helpful herself. Carla listened carefully, grateful for the advice, and promised herself she would try them in the quiet of her apartment later that evening. It felt good to acknowledge her limitations without surrendering to them, to find strategies instead of excuses. Back home, Carla explored gentle movement routines, guided by Helen's suggestions and her own intuition. She focused on slow, mindful stretches, feeling each muscle lengthen and release tension. The act of moving carefully, without pressure, reminded her that her body's limitations were not permanent, but signals that required attention and respect. She imagined her muscles as pliable threads, coaxing them to weave new patterns of strength and flexibility. With each repetition, the discomfort ebbed slightly and a sense of control returned, not in conquering her body, but in collaborating with it. Later in the afternoon, Carla received a phone call from her doctor, a reassuring voice reminding her that setbacks were a natural part of recovery and health maintenance. The conversation was comforting. It reminded her that she was not navigating these challenges alone. The doctor emphasized balance, patience, and listening closely to her body's cues. Carla noted the advice with care, feeling a sense of clarity. She understood that her journey was not linear and that resilience was cultivated through repeated acknowledgement of both progress and obstacles. In the quiet of her living room, Carla reflected on the emotions stirred by the morning's pain. Frustration had threatened to overwhelm her, but she recognized it as a fleeting companion rather than a permanent resident. She allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, acknowledging that it was natural to feel discouraged when progress felt uncertain. Yet she also reminded herself of the many small victories she had accumulated, the gentle walks, the flavorful meals, the moments of curiosity and wonder. These reminders created a foundation of stability beneath the shifting sands of temporary setbacks. Carla decided to revisit the community garden, hoping that connection with the living greenery might soothe her spirit. As she tended a small patch of herbs, she noticed the resilience of the plants themselves. Despite wind, sun, and rain, they bent and adapted without breaking. She drew a parallel to her own situation, realizing that her knees, aching as they were, could learn similar resilience through care and attention. Each bend of a plant stem became a metaphor for patience, each sprout a symbol of hope. Her hands worked in rhythm with her breath, grounding her in the present moment and easing the anxiety stirred by her physical discomfort. By evening, Carla felt a cautious sense of accomplishment. She had navigated the day with awareness, responded to her body's signals, and maintained her commitment to her journey. The setback had not defined her. Instead, it had offered an opportunity to practice mindfulness, patience, and adaptability. She prepared a nourishing dinner, incorporating gentle, easily digestible ingredients, allowing her body to recover and replenish energy. Each bite carried the satisfaction of care and intention, reinforcing a connection between nourishment and healing. Before bed, Carla journaled once again, recording the day's experiences, emotions, and reflections. She wrote candidly about the frustration of her knee pain, the strategies she had employed to manage it, and the insights gained through observation and reflection. Her writing became a dialogue with herself, a gentle reassurance that setbacks were part of a larger narrative of growth and well-being. In these intimate moments, she found both comfort and resolve, strengthening the internal narrative that guided her journey with patience and curiosity. As sleep approached, Carla felt the day's lessons settling gently in her mind. She understood that setbacks, though sometimes unwelcome, were valuable teachers. They offered insight into her body's needs, her emotional resilience, and the importance of attentive care. With gratitude for the small victories, compassion for the challenges, and curiosity for tomorrow's possibilities, she drifted into a deep, restorative sleep. The ache in her knees remained, but it had softened into a gentle reminder rather than an obstacle, a whisper that she was engaged in a meaningful journey of awareness, care, and transformation. Carla woke the next morning with a lingering sense of calm, the kind that follows a day spent listening to her own body. The stiffness in her knees had softened overnight, and she noticed it without judgment, simply observing the quiet shift. There was a subtle thrill in recognizing that progress was not always loud or dramatic. It often whispered in gentle, almost imperceptible ways. Carla stretched slowly, enjoying the ritual of awakening muscles that had been asleep, acknowledging them with gratitude for their continued support. Each movement felt intentional, a small ceremony that connected her to her physical self in a way she had rarely practiced before. After her morning stretches, Carla made her way to the kitchen, where sunlight poured across the countertop, warming the wooden surfaces and casting long, delicate shadows. She prepared a simple breakfast, choosing oats, a handful of berries, and a sprinkling of nuts. The act of preparing food, usually a routine task, had become a quiet meditation for her, a moment of mindful engagement that nourished more than just her body. As she stirred the oats, she reflected on the joy found in simple rituals, realizing that it was often the repetition of these small acts that created a sense of stability and calm in her days. Even mundane tasks became infused with meaning, offering a rhythm that grounded her in the present moment. Carla's cat, Miso, curled beside her feet, purring softly, adding a soundtrack of warmth and companionship to her morning. She smiled down at him, appreciating the quiet presence that accompanied her daily rituals. In that moment, she understood that her routine was not simply about physical care, but about cultivating emotional resilience as well. Each action, no matter how small, contributed to a growing sense of mastery over her environment and her choices. Preparing a meal, tending to a plant, or simply sitting in the sunlight became acts of intention, gentle affirmations that her days were hers to shape. Later, Carla stepped outside to water the small herb garden on her balcony. The familiar weight of the watering can, the rhythmic movement of pouring water over each plant, and the earthy scent of soil all brought a quiet satisfaction. The herbs thrived under her care, their vibrant leaves a visible testament to patience and attentiveness. Carla admired the basil, rosemary, and mint, noticing how their growth mirrored the slow progress of her own journey. Just as she tended to the plants with care, she realized that her body and mind required similar attention, gentle, consistent, and filled with patience. The connection between tending life and tending self was simple, yet profound. In the afternoon, Carla prepared her favorite cup of chamomile tea and settled into the armchair by the window. The warm liquid soothed her throat while the mild aroma seemed to ease the tension that sometimes accumulated in her shoulders. She closed her eyes briefly, letting her mind drift, observing thoughts without judgment. Carla felt a quiet satisfaction in the simplicity of this moment, a recognition that health and wellness were not always found in grand gestures, but in repeated small acts of care. Her rituals, though ordinary on the surface, provided a structure that nurtured both body and spirit, allowing her to move through her day with clarity and intention. Carla's friend Lila stopped by in the late afternoon, bringing a basket of fresh vegetables from the farmer's market. They shared a warm embrace, laughter filling the small apartment. Together, they prepared a simple, colorful salad, each chop of the knife, each sprinkle of seasoning, a collaborative rhythm that transformed the task into an enjoyable experience. Carla noticed how sharing these routines with another person amplified the sense of joy and connection she had discovered. It was a reminder that wellness was not only an individual endeavor, but also a shared one, enriched by community and companionship. Evening arrived with a gentle hush, the soft glow of lamps casting pools of light across the room. Carla took a slow walk along the quiet streets, breathing in the evening air, feeling the subtle coolness against her skin. The rhythm of her steps, the quiet hum of distant traffic, and the occasional bark of a dog created a soundtrack that was soothing rather than distracting. She reflected on how her daily rituals, morning stretches, mindful meals, tea, gardening, and evening walks had begun to form a mosaic of consistency that stabilized her life. These moments, small in isolation, accumulated into a broader sense of control, grounding her in both body and mind. Upon returning home, Carla prepared a light dinner of steamed vegetables and a poached egg, savoring each bite with attention and gratitude. The act of eating had become more than sustenance. It was a way to engage all her senses, a ritual of nourishment and presence. She noticed textures, colors, and flavors more vividly, appreciating the effort that went into each ingredient's journey from soil to plate. Carla understood that these daily routines, though simple, were quietly transformative. Each careful choice, each intentional action contributed to a growing sense of well-being that extended beyond physical health, touching her spirit and emotional resilience. Before bed, Carla lit a small candle by her bedside and journaled about the day. She reflected on her rituals, the subtle joys discovered, and the growing awareness of how intentional actions shaped her experience of life. Writing became a ritual in itself, a gentle way to process her thoughts and feelings while reinforcing the lessons she had learned. As she wrote, she felt a sense of accomplishment, not in grand achievements, but in the consistency and mindfulness of her daily actions. These small rituals were quietly powerful, creating a rhythm that anchored her days and nurtured her body and soul. Finally, Carla prepared for sleep with a short, mindful breathing exercise, letting her thoughts settle like leaves drifting to the bottom of a pond. She acknowledged her body's limitations with acceptance and gratitude, embracing both strengths and vulnerabilities. The evening rituals had carried her through the day with a sense of grace, leaving her ready for rest and renewal. As she lay down, she felt a profound appreciation for the simplicity of these routines and their quiet but enduring impact on her life. In the comfort of her own space, she experienced the deep, unspoken joy that comes from caring for oneself with attention and love. Carla's journey revealed a truth she had only begun to understand. Wellness was not a destination, but a practice, a series of mindful actions repeated with patience and kindness. Her rituals, no matter how ordinary, became sacred in their consistency, offering a sense of mastery, calm, and connection. By embracing these small practices, Carla discovered that life's richness was not always in extraordinary moments, but often in the steady rhythm of intention, attention, and care. Each day, with its ordinary but meaningful actions, became a step toward a more resilient, balanced, and fulfilled self. Carla woke to a soft morning light filtering through her curtains, casting gentle patterns on the walls of her bedroom. For the first time in months, she noticed a subtle strength in her body that she hadn't felt in a long while. It wasn't a dramatic change, but a quiet resilience, a tiny spark that whispered she was capable of more than she had allowed herself to believe. Her hands, once stiff from years of sedentary habits and lingering aches, moved with surprising ease as she reached for her journal on the bedside table. That simple act, usually taken for granted, now felt like a small triumph, a sign that the daily rituals she had cultivated were beginning to weave themselves into her very being. The memory of her doctor's concerned look still lingered in her mind, the moment when she was told that neglecting her health could accelerate the decline she feared. It had been a wake-up call, a jolt that sent her searching for practical, sustainable ways to regain control. Carla had started with small steps, gentle stretches, mindful meals, and quiet walks, never imagining that these modest actions could lead to something more profound. Today, however, she sensed a shift. Her body was responding, and she realized that some of the strength she thought lost to age or circumstance was quietly waiting to be rediscovered. After breakfast, Carla decided to venture into the park nearby, carrying a small notebook and her water bottle. The park, with its wide, tree-lined paths and soft rustle of leaves, felt welcoming, almost familiar. As she walked, she noticed the cadence of her steps, the steadiness of her breathing, and the subtle coordination of her muscles. Each movement felt like a reconnection with her body, a reminder that strength is often hidden in plain sight until we choose to pay attention. Carla's mind wandered to the days when she had been more physically active, playing tennis in her youth and hiking with friends on weekends. Those memories now carried a gentle lesson. The capabilities of our bodies may pause, but they rarely disappear entirely. Sitting on a weathered wooden bench, Carla watched an older couple practicing Tai Chi, their movements slow, deliberate, and surprisingly graceful. She marveled at the harmony between their bodies and minds, realizing that strength was as much about balance and awareness as it was about raw power. Inspired, she began to experiment with small movements herself, raising her arms, twisting gently, feeling the stretch in her torso and limbs. Each motion reminded her that even in small increments, progress was happening. The subtle joy of reconnecting with physical strength was paired with a deeper emotional satisfaction, a recognition that her body was still a source of capability and potential. Carla's thoughts turned to her granddaughter, Emma, who had visited just last week and enthusiastically challenged her to try a few yoga poses together. Carla had hesitated at first, worried about her joints and flexibility, but she had quickly discovered a hidden adaptability she hadn't acknowledged in years. That memory brought a smile to her face as she realized that strength wasn't only physical, it was also the courage to try, to engage with life fully, despite the caution that age often imposes. She made a mental note to invite Emma for another session soon, eager to share the joy of rediscovered abilities and to embrace the playful spirit that children bring into everyday life. Later that afternoon, Carla returned home and found herself drawn to her small collection of hand weights tucked in a corner. She picked them up gingerly, lifting them with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The initial heaviness felt daunting, but as she began a few controlled repetitions, she noticed her muscles awakening in response. The familiar strain was not painful, it was invigorating. Carla remembered how she had once taken her body's strength for granted, assuming it would always perform effortlessly. Now, every lift, every contraction carried significance. Her physical power was no longer invisible. It was tangible in a way that reminded her of the agency she still possessed over her health and well-being. Carla's phone buzzed with a message from her neighbor, inviting her to join a small walking group that met 3 times a week. Normally, social gatherings required a certain energy she often lacked, but today felt different. She agreed immediately, sensing that this could be another opportunity to nurture her body and spirit simultaneously. Strength, she realized, was not only about muscles and endurance, it was also about courage, commitment, and the willingness to step outside one's comfort zone. By participating in shared routines, she would not only reinforce her physical abilities, but also cultivate emotional resilience through community connection. In the evening, Carla returned home, feeling pleasantly fatigued yet uplifted by the sense of accomplishment. She prepared a light, nourishing dinner, paying close attention to textures, colors, and flavors, each bite reinforcing her commitment to herself. As she ate, she reflected on how far she had come in just a few weeks of intentional action. The rediscovery of strength was gradual, often subtle, yet unmistakably real. She realized that these moments of self-awareness, these small triumphs, were the foundation upon which long-term transformation could be built. Before bedtime, Carla wrote in her journal, recounting the day's experiences and the newfound confidence she had felt in her physical capabilities. She drew little sketches of the park bench, the Tai Chi couple, and her hand weights, capturing the visual reminders of her journey. Writing had become a sacred ritual, a way to solidify insights and acknowledge progress, no matter how incremental. Carla noticed that the act of documenting her journey was itself a form of strength building, a mental reinforcement that reminded her daily of her evolving resilience. As she settled into bed, Carla allowed herself a rare sense of pride. The journey of rediscovering strength was ongoing, and while there were moments of doubt and discomfort, they no longer dominated her narrative. She understood that every deliberate step, every gentle stretch, and every mindful choice contributed to an unfolding story of empowerment. Her body, once perceived as fragile, had become a partner in her daily life, capable of quiet feats that reflected both physical capability and inner determination. Finally, Carla closed her eyes with a soft smile, feeling a sense of completeness and anticipation for tomorrow. Strength, she understood, was not measured solely by visible achievements, but by the willingness to engage, persist, and notice subtle changes. Rediscovering her capabilities had reminded her that age did not define limitation. Intentional action did. Each day offered a chance to reconnect with her body, embrace resilience, and honor the often overlooked powers she carried within her. In that quiet moment, Carla felt ready to face the future, knowing that the journey of rediscovery was as much about mind and spirit as it was about muscle and motion. The following morning, Carla awoke with a gentle determination that surprised even her. The sunlight spilling into her room seemed warmer, almost encouraging, as if it understood the quiet shifts occurring inside her. Her body no longer protested the day ahead with fatigue or hesitation. Instead, a subtle energy pulsed through her limbs, a steady rhythm that mirrored the newfound balance she had been cultivating. Just yesterday, she had marveled at her ability to lift light weights and move freely, and today, she sensed the beginnings of something deeper, an endurance she hadn't realized she still possessed. Carla's walk to the local park felt different from her previous strolls. She moved with intention, aware of each breath and step, appreciating the sensation of her heart pumping steadily, the wind brushing against her cheeks. Along the path, she noticed neighbors jogging and children playing, and a small smile tugged at her lips. In those simple moments, Carla recognized a lesson she had often overlooked. Endurance was not measured by grand achievements or extreme exertion, but by consistency and awareness. Each step, each controlled breath reinforced the quiet strength that had been building inside her over weeks of patient effort. At the park's edge, Carla paused to watch a small group practicing gentle stretching exercises. Their instructor, a warm-voiced woman in her late 50s, spoke softly about pacing oneself, listening to the body, and celebrating small victories. Carla felt a strange sense of kinship. These people understood the rhythm of gradual progress. She joined in tentatively, raising her arms, bending at the waist, and feeling the slow release of tension through her spine and shoulders. The act of moving deliberately, of honoring her body's pace, was in itself a revelation. She realized that endurance was as much mental as physical, a harmony between effort and awareness, persistence and patience. Later, Carla sat on a sun-warmed bench, taking in the vibrant colors of the surrounding trees and flowers. She reflected on the months before her journey began, when fatigue and hesitation had dominated her days. Simple tasks, carrying groceries, climbing stairs, even standing for long periods had felt exhausting. Now she felt a quiet confidence in her ability to manage not just these tasks, but the unexpected challenges that life often presented. The endurance she was cultivating was teaching her to trust herself, to recognize that her body and mind were capable of more than she had credited them. Carla's thoughts drifted to her family, especially her daughter Leah, who had often worried about her mother's health. Leah had always admired Carla's resilience, but now she noticed a subtle shift, a calm, steady energy that radiated from her mother. Carla smiled, imagining the look on Leah's face when she described the park walks, the gentle exercises, and the small milestones she had quietly celebrated. Endurance, Carla realized, was not only a personal gift, but also an example for others, a quiet inspiration that could ripple outward to those she loved. On her way home, Carla decided to stop by a small cafe she had once frequented, but had avoided in recent months due to fatigue and busyness. Sitting at a corner table with a cup of herbal tea, she allowed herself a moment to savor the experience fully. The aroma of the tea, the murmur of conversations, and the warm sunlight streaming through the windows seemed richer, more vivid than before. Each sensory detail reinforced the idea that endurance was not merely about sustaining physical activity, it was about sustaining presence, attention, and engagement in life's daily rhythms. She felt grateful for the small but profound ways in which her journey had changed her perception of herself and the world around her. At home, Carla decided to integrate her newfound endurance into her evening routine. She filled a shallow basin with warm water and soaked her hands, relishing the sensation of circulation improving with each movement. Then she prepared a simple, nourishing meal, carefully including vegetables and grains she had learned supported energy and stamina. Eating slowly, she noticed the difference in her body's response, a sense of fullness that energized rather than weighed her down. It was as though her body had begun to understand the rhythm of care, of giving and receiving, in a way that was entirely new. Later that night, Carla settled into her favorite armchair with a soft blanket and her journal. She began to write about the unexpected endurance she had discovered, how it manifested not as bursts of strength but as sustained energy, mental clarity, and the ability to embrace the day's tasks with calm assurance. She recalled the moments that had tested her patience, the first time she attempted a longer walk, the awkwardness of joining a new exercise group, the hesitations before lifting even light weights. Each challenge had become an opportunity to learn, to listen, and to honor her body's capacity for sustained effort. As she reflected, Carla felt a profound shift in her relationship with herself. Endurance was no longer a distant ideal, something to admire in others but never claim for herself. It was tangible, woven into the very fabric of her daily life, emerging in quiet yet powerful ways. She realized that this endurance extended beyond the physical. It encompassed emotional resilience, the ability to remain patient in the face of setbacks, and the courage to continue forward even when progress seemed imperceptible. Each day she nurtured her body, mind, and spirit, reinforcing a cycle of strength that promised long-term benefits. Carla's thoughts drifted to future possibilities, the hikes she might take, the exercises she could explore, the social gatherings she might join without fear of exhaustion. The endurance she was building offered freedom from hesitation, from self-doubt, and from the constraints she had once accepted as inevitable. She understood that by honoring her body's needs, pacing herself thoughtfully, and celebrating each small milestone, she was creating a sustainable pattern of wellness that would serve her for years to come. Finally, as the evening deepened and the world outside grew quiet, Carla closed her journal with a sense of peace. She felt present, strong, and ready for whatever challenges or joys the next day might bring. The gift of endurance was unexpected, not because it was hidden, but because it revealed itself gradually, subtly, and profoundly through consistent, mindful action. In that quiet room, bathed in the soft glow of her reading lamp, Carla understood that endurance was not a distant destination, but a living, breathing companion, one that had been waiting for her to recognize it all along. Carla woke to the soft chirping of sparrows outside her window, the morning light spilling gently across her bedspread. She stretched slowly, savoring the feeling of limber muscles and the absence of yesterday's lingering stiffness. Over the past weeks, she had begun to notice subtle shifts in her body, small changes that hinted at larger transformations. and it struck her that all of this had started with the smallest of habits. It was a simple practice, a short morning walk, a careful choice at the grocery store, a few minutes of mindful breathing before sleep. Each habit seemed insignificant alone, yet together they were beginning to reshape her days, her energy, and even her outlook. At breakfast, Carla made a quiet ritual of preparing her tea, selecting a slice of whole grain toast, and sprinkling a handful of nuts over her yogurt. She did not rush, she allowed each action to be deliberate. It was more than just eating, it was a practice of mindfulness, a way to honor the small efforts that cumulatively supported her health. She recalled the mornings when fatigue had dominated her routine, when the thought of moving from her bed to the kitchen had felt like a challenge too great to face. Now, these small choices were her allies, gently reinforcing a sense of agency and control. As Carla washed her hands and face, she reflected on her previous resistance to routines. She had often dismissed small habits as unimportant, believing that only grand efforts could produce meaningful results. Yet here she was, witnessing the tangible effects of consistency and patience. She noticed that her skin glowed slightly brighter, her movements were steadier, and her focus had improved. Each small habit had built a scaffold of well-being, reinforcing endurance, strength, and calm awareness. The realization warmed her spirit. Sometimes the most powerful transformations are imperceptible at first, revealed only through reflection and time. After breakfast, Carla decided to take her usual walk, a route winding through her neighborhood lined with trees and flowering shrubs. She carried a small notebook in her pocket, jotting down observations, the way sunlight dappled the sidewalk, the pattern of bird calls, the laughter of children at play. These notes were her quiet celebration of the small details she had once ignored and the habits that had allowed her to notice them. With each step, she felt gratitude for the way her body moved with ease and for the rhythm she had cultivated through consistent, mindful action. The walk was not about speed or distance, it was about presence, observation, and integrating the habits that supported her vitality. Along the path, Carla encountered Mrs. Thompson, a neighbor she had known for years but rarely spoken to in depth. Today, they paused to exchange a few words about the garden blooms, the weather, and the importance of daily movement. Mrs. Thompson remarked on how vibrant Carla seemed, how steady her pace, and how much more engaged she appeared with life itself. Carla smiled, realizing that the habits she had embraced were now visible, not only in her own perception, but in the subtle recognition of others. It was a gentle affirmation, reminding her that even small, private efforts could ripple outward and inspire those around her. Returning home, Carla focused on her kitchen, the heart of her domestic routines. She chose vegetables rich in color, bell peppers, spinach, carrots, and carefully prepared them, taking time to appreciate textures, aromas, and the natural beauty of the food. Cooking had become a meditative act, one that connected her to her body, her environment, and the subtle ways that habits could nourish more than just her physical form. The simple act of chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, and tasting along the way reinforced her growing understanding. Habits, though small, accumulate into a tapestry of wellness, patience, and self-respect. Carla's thoughts drifted to her daughter, Leah, who often sought her advice on managing daily stress and maintaining energy. Carla reflected on how she could convey the power of small habits to Leah without lecturing or prescribing. Instead, she realized that sharing her own experiences, how walking every morning, choosing balanced meals, and dedicating minutes to mindful breathing had transformed her day-to-day life, was more impactful than any directive. Small habits, she understood, were not rigid rules, but gentle choices that, over time, reshaped one's life. In the afternoon, Carla spent time tending her tiny balcony garden. She watered the plants carefully, pruned leaves, and adjusted the positioning of pots to capture optimal sunlight. Each movement, simple yet deliberate, echoed the lessons she had learned, that sustained attention and care, applied consistently, produce remarkable outcomes. She noticed the subtle resilience of the plants, their steady growth despite changing weather, and felt a parallel with her own journey. Habits, she realized, were like seeds. They needed nurturing, patience, and repetition to bloom into lasting change. Later, as evening approached, Carla settled into her favorite chair with a warm blanket and a cup of chamomile tea. She reflected on the day, journaling briefly about her walk, the meals she had prepared, and the small moments of mindfulness she had practiced. In writing, she felt a clarity that was both grounding and inspiring. Each habit she cultivated did not demand perfection, only consistency and intention. Through these small, steady practices, she felt her energy, focus, and sense of well-being deepening, reinforcing a belief she had long dismissed. That true transformation often begins with tiny, seemingly inconsequential choices. Carla thought about her physical exercises, the gentle stretches, and strength movements she had incorporated. What once seemed tedious or unnecessary had now become a cornerstone of her routine. Each session reinforced her stamina, her balance, and her connection with her body. She noted how these small, deliberate actions rippled through her daily life, reducing fatigue, enhancing clarity, and nurturing confidence. Small habits, she realized, were not merely tasks. They were building blocks, silently crafting a foundation for resilience, health, and vitality. As night settled, Carla reflected on her mental and emotional landscape. She recognized that these small habits extended beyond the physical. They shaped her attitude, her perception of challenges, and her approach to life. By intentionally choosing her actions, whether walking, cooking, or journaling, she was gradually reshaping her inner world, creating a rhythm of calm and purpose. She realized that habits were not restrictions, but invitations, offering repeated opportunities to cultivate strength, awareness, and joy. Before bed, Carla performed a short ritual of gratitude, acknowledging the small yet meaningful actions of the day. She noted the meals she had enjoyed, the steps she had taken, the interactions with neighbors, and the quiet moments of reflection. Each habit, no matter how minute, was a thread in the broader tapestry of her health and happiness. In embracing the power of small habits, she had discovered an unexpected freedom, the ability to shape her days intentionally, to nurture herself steadily, and to witness the gradual blossoming of her own endurance and well-being. Finally, as she slipped beneath her soft quilt, Carla felt a gentle pride. The day had been ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in its impact. Through small, consistent habits, she had deepened her connection to her body, her mind, and her surroundings. She understood more fully than ever that lasting transformation was rarely abrupt. It emerged quietly, patiently, and persistently through the choices made every day. In that serene, reflective moment, Carla knew she was exactly where she needed to be, learning, growing, and thriving through the simple, profound power of small habits. Carla's kitchen smelled like cinnamon and rosemary as the morning sun filtered through the lace curtains. She moved with quiet intention, arranging bowls of chopped vegetables, a few sprigs of fresh herbs, and the gentle hum of the stovetop filling the room. Cooking had become more than a necessity, it was a sanctuary, a space where she could nurture herself with care and creativity. She remembered how, just a few months ago, meals had been rushed affairs, hastily prepared and eaten with little thought. Now, every ingredient, every stir, every sprinkle of spice held a deliberate purpose, a tiny ritual that connected her to both body and spirit. As she kneaded the dough for her homemade bread, Carla reflected on the subtle ways cooking had reshaped her life. The tactile sensation of flour between her fingers, the rhythmic folding and pressing, became almost meditative. She realized that mindful cooking required attention, patience, and a willingness to savor each moment, qualities she had cultivated through her evolving habits. The bread would rise slowly, much like the transformation she was experiencing, a quiet reminder that the best results were not instant, but nurtured with care and consistency. Carla's daughter Leah stopped by mid-morning, drawn by the rich aroma of simmering herbs. They exchanged smiles, and Carla invited her to help with a simple task, washing the leafy greens. As Leah moved beside her mother, Carla noticed the joy in sharing this ritual, the unspoken connection forged through the preparation of meals. She realized that mindful cooking was not only nourishing for herself, but also a gift to others, a way to offer presence, warmth, and intention to those she loved. Each slice, stir, and sprinkle became a gesture of care, reinforcing the idea that health was as much about connection and joy as it was about food. While stirring a fragrant tomato sauce, Carla thought about the lessons hidden in these daily practices. Cooking mindfully required awareness of textures, flavors, and smells, and in turn, it sharpened her senses in ways she had long taken for granted. She could detect the subtle sweetness of fresh tomatoes, the earthy aroma of basil, and the gentle warmth of garlic sizzling in olive oil. These sensory details, once overlooked, now grounded her in the present, reminding her of the richness of life in every bite. The process was not about perfection, it was about presence, patience, and appreciation. As the day unfolded, Carla experimented with a new recipe, combining familiar vegetables with grains she had never cooked before. She laughed softly at the small mishaps, the occasional spill, a slightly uneven chop, but each moment carried a lesson in resilience and adaptability. Cooking mindfully had taught her that life itself was similar. Small missteps could be absorbed and adapted to, and the act of engagement mattered more than flawless execution. The meal, once completed, was a reflection of this philosophy, rich, wholesome, and created with love, imperfections included. Carla's neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, peeked in to borrow a small jar of spices, and the two women fell into an easy conversation about favorite meals, seasonal produce, and family traditions. Carla felt the warmth of these exchanges, realizing that cooking mindfully also created opportunities for connection, conversation, and shared joy. Each gesture of offering or sharing food was intertwined with intention, reflection, and care, extending the benefits of her small habits outward into her community. As she plated the meal, Carla paused to appreciate the colors and textures before her. The vibrant orange of roasted carrots, the deep green of sautéed spinach, and the golden crust of her bread formed a mosaic of nourishment. She marveled at how something as simple as preparing a meal with care could evoke such profound satisfaction, grounding her in gratitude for her health, her home, and the life she was slowly reshaping. Cooking had become a lens through which she could observe her growth. Patience, attention, and love poured into something tangible, feeding both body and soul. During lunch, Carla savored each bite slowly, noting the interplay of flavors and the way her body responded with energy and ease. She reflected on the contrast with her past habits. Hasty meals consumed amid distractions, leaving her fatigued and disconnected. Now, the act of eating was an extension of the mindfulness she practiced while cooking. Each bite reinforced the rhythm she had established in her life, reminding her that deliberate actions, even small ones, cultivated well-being, satisfaction, and joy. After the meal, Carla washed the dishes with the same mindful attention she had brought to preparation. The simple act of cleaning became an extension of the care she had invested in cooking, a final gesture that honored the effort and nourishment provided. She noticed how this practice, once mundane, now carried a sense of completion and fulfillment. It was another instance of how mindful habits, though subtle, wove together to create a harmonious, satisfying day. Later, Carla sat by the window with her notebook, jotting down reflections about the meals she had prepared, the flavors she had discovered, and the satisfaction of sharing them with others. She considered how cooking mindfully had strengthened not only her physical health, but also her emotional resilience. The process demanded focus, presence, and intention, teaching her to value the journey as much as the result. Each recipe, each meal, each small effort became part of the larger narrative of her transformation. Carla also thought about how mindful cooking had influenced her approach to other aspects of life. Tasks that once seemed tedious or overwhelming, tidying the house, organizing schedules, or even handling daily errands, now carried a sense of purpose and calm when approached with attention and care. She realized that the lessons learned in the kitchen, patience, presence, and appreciation, were transferable, enriching every corner of her daily experience. In the evening, Carla prepared a simple dessert, a fruit compote sweetened with a hint of honey, and shared it with Leah over quiet conversation. They laughed about small mistakes, tasted, adjusted, and celebrated the flavors together. Carla felt the full circle of her journey. Habits that began as solitary efforts had evolved into shared rituals, deepening her connections and reinforcing her sense of fulfillment. Cooking mindfully had become both a personal practice and a bridge to others, nurturing relationships as much as health. Before bed, Carla reflected on the day, feeling gratitude for the lessons embedded in mindful cooking. She realized that small, intentional actions, repeated consistently, had the power to transform ordinary moments into meaningful experiences. The act of preparing, savoring, and sharing meals had taught her patience, presence, and joy, qualities that enriched every aspect of her life. She understood that mindful cooking was not merely about nutrition, but about cultivating awareness, connection, and a deeper appreciation for the rhythm of daily life. As she slipped under her quilt that night, the aroma of herbs still lingering in the air, Carla felt a profound sense of contentment. She had discovered that the art of cooking mindfully could anchor her, guide her, and remind her that transformation was a journey, not a destination. Every chop, stir, and taste had contributed to a broader awakening, a realization that health, joy, and connection arise not from grand gestures, but from the careful, loving attention given to even the smallest tasks. Carla awoke to the soft light of dawn streaming through her bedroom window. The gentle chirping of birds outside seemed to invite her to start the day with purpose, yet she paused, stretching lazily under the covers. For years, she had avoided exercise, telling herself she was too tired, too busy, or too fragile. But over the past months, she had noticed small, persistent aches that reminded her that her body needed attention, not punishment. Today felt different. Today, movement wouldn't be a chore, but a form of gratitude for the vessel that had carried her through decades of life. She put on a comfortable pair of sneakers and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The neighborhood was quiet, only a few early risers tending to their gardens or walking their dogs. Carla inhaled deeply, noticing the subtle scents of dew on grass and faint traces of blooming flowers. Each breath felt like a gentle affirmation. She was here, she was alive, and she had the opportunity to nurture herself through movement. As she began a slow walk, she felt the rhythm of her steps syncing with her heartbeat, a gentle cadence that reminded her of childhood days spent running through open fields. The sensation was simple, yet profoundly liberating. By the second block, Carla's thoughts wandered to the little victories she had already achieved. She remembered the first time she had successfully climbed a short flight of stairs without needing to pause for breath. That memory had seemed trivial then, yet now it symbolized the beginning of her journey toward reclaiming strength and mobility. Each step she took today carried that same spirit, a small but tangible testament to persistence, patience, and self-kindness. Movement was no longer a test. It was a celebration, a dialogue with her body that acknowledged both its limits and its capabilities. Carla's neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, waved from his porch. "Morning, Carla. Looks like you're enjoying the day," he called out. Carla smiled, waving back. She realized how much social interaction influenced her motivation. Seeing others engage in their own routines subtly encouraged her to embrace hers with enthusiasm, without judgment or competition. Movement, she reflected, was not only about the body, it was about presence, attention, and connection, both to herself and to the world around her. Each step she took was an act of mindfulness, a gentle reminder that life continued outside the confines of her home. Arriving at the small park near her house, Carla decided to stretch beside a familiar oak tree. The bark was rough beneath her fingertips, grounding her as she leaned gently into each stretch. Her muscles protested slightly at first, reminding her of their dormancy, but she welcomed the sensation. It was proof of awakening, of progress, of the body re-engaging with its natural rhythm. She swayed gently, feeling the flow of energy through her limbs, and was struck by the realization that movement, once dreaded, could now be a source of delight. Carla paused to watch a group of senior women practicing Tai Chi. Their movements were fluid and deliberate, a quiet choreography that radiated calm and focus. She felt an unexpected curiosity and perhaps even longing to try. Approaching them cautiously, she asked if she could join in. The instructor smiled warmly, guiding her through gentle motions. Each movement required attention, balance, and breath, and Carla found herself becoming immersed in the slow, meditative flow. There was a serenity in it, a tangible proof that movement could heal not just the body but the mind. Afterward, Carla returned home with a lightness in her step, feeling muscles she hadn't noticed in years awaken with new purpose. She realized that integrating movement into her life wasn't about intensity or strict routines. It was about listening to her body, responding to its needs, and embracing joy in the process. A brisk walk, a few stretches, or even tending to her garden became expressions of self-care rather than obligations. Movement had transformed from a dreaded duty into an empowering ritual that reinforced her resilience and vitality. Later that afternoon, Carla decided to try a short, gentle yoga session in her living room. With soft music playing and a window open to let in fresh air, she followed along with a video designed for seniors. The poses were simple, yet they demanded focus and balance, drawing her awareness inward. She noticed the subtle tensions in her shoulders, the tightness in her lower back, and the gradual release as she shifted and stretched. With each breath, she felt more connected to herself, more present, and more appreciative of the gift of her body. Carla's granddaughter, Mia, joined her halfway through the session. The two shared smiles, laughed at the occasional wobbles, and encouraged each other through the motions. Carla realized how movement could bridge generations, creating a shared space for learning, laughter, and bonding. It wasn't about perfection or performance, it was about presence, attention, and the joy of shared experience. She felt gratitude for these moments, small yet profound, that enriched her life in ways she hadn't anticipated. As evening approached, Carla reflected on the day's journey. She felt a sense of accomplishment, not from a rigorous workout or measurable gains, but from reconnecting with her body and rediscovering the joy of movement. She noticed subtle improvements. Her posture was straighter, her steps lighter, her mood brighter. Movement had become an integral part of her life, a thread woven into the fabric of daily living, influencing her energy, confidence, and overall sense of well-being. Carla's mind wandered to the future, imagining herself incorporating new forms of movement, gentle hikes, water aerobics, or even dancing to her favorite music in the living room. The possibilities felt expansive rather than intimidating. She realized that movement was less about achieving a specific goal and more about fostering a mindset of attentiveness, curiosity, and delight. Each step, stretch, or sway was an investment in her health, joy, and connection to life itself. Before bed, Carla did a final round of stretches, softly smiling as she felt the day's work settle into her muscles. The aches that had once discouraged her were now signs of life and engagement, subtle reminders that her body was capable and resilient. She lay down, feeling warmth in her chest, a deep appreciation for the simple yet profound act of moving with intention. She understood that this was a practice she would carry forward, gently, joyfully, without pressure or expectation. An ongoing journey that celebrated presence, vitality, and self-compassion. As she drifted into sleep, the memory of the morning walk, the Tai Chi session, and the yoga practice intertwined, forming a tapestry of mindful movement. Carla felt a quiet contentment, a sense of belonging in her own body, and the reassurance that she was on a path that honored her age, her strength, and her evolving needs. Movement had become a language through which she expressed care for herself, an intimate dialogue with her body that nourished both spirit and form. Carla noticed more than ever how much her life had shifted since she began paying attention to her body. The mornings filled with gentle walks and stretches were not just nurturing her health, they were also opening her world in ways she had almost forgotten. One afternoon, as she sipped tea by her window, she felt a soft knock on the door. It was Margaret, her longtime neighbor and friend, smiling warmly and carrying a small plate of freshly baked scones. They had known each other for decades, yet in recent years, life's pace and quiet health concerns had kept them from truly connecting. Today, something subtle had changed. Carla realized she craved companionship as much as self-care. They settled in the sunlit kitchen, the scent of warm tea and baked dough mingling with the faint aroma of flowers from the windowsill. Margaret's eyes sparkled with curiosity as she asked about Carla's recent routines. Carla found herself describing the morning walks, the Tai Chi sessions, and the little yoga stretches with a soft enthusiasm she hadn't felt in months. Margaret listened intently, nodding and smiling, and then, almost shyly, she asked if she could join in the next morning. Carla felt a warmth spread across her chest. What had started as a solo journey was now gently expanding into a shared experience. A ripple of connection that brought joy she hadn't anticipated. The next day, Margaret arrived at Carla's doorstep with a small water bottle and a soft blanket for stretching. They walked together through the neighborhood, their steps slower but synchronized, laughter spilling into the quiet streets. Carla noticed how movement with a companion changed the experience. Each conversation, each shared observation about the sunrise or the rustling leaves added richness to the physical activity. It wasn't just exercise, it was fellowship, a mutual care that filled gaps Carla hadn't realized existed in her life. Walking side by side, they talked about family, memories, and the little joys that had once seemed trivial but now felt deeply meaningful. During their Tai Chi session that morning, Carla observed how Margaret's focus and gentle demeanor mirrored her own, creating a rhythm of shared energy. They moved slowly, intentionally, as if each gesture were a conversation between their bodies and the world around them. Carla marveled at how something so simple, a coordinated breath, a gentle sway, could produce such profound calm and clarity. It became clear that friendship, like movement, had the power to heal, not through words or solutions, but through presence and mutual understanding. She realized that by opening herself to companionship, she was nourishing not only her body, but also her emotional well-being. Over the next few weeks, Carla and Margaret made these morning sessions a habit. They discovered quiet spots in the park where the grass felt soft beneath their feet, and the sunlight filtered through the branches just right. Carla noticed that her energy levels increased, her moods lifted, and her evenings were filled with a serene satisfaction she hadn't experienced in years. Sharing her routines with Margaret added a layer of accountability, yes, but also a sense of shared accomplishment. The journey toward wellness, which had once been solitary and introspective, now felt communal, encouraging, and alive. Carla's daughter, Sophie, soon noticed the change in her mother. When she called, she could hear the warmth in Carla's voice, the laughter threading through conversations that had once been filled with quiet resignation. "Mom, you sound so happy," Sophie said one evening, the observation soft but heartfelt. Carla smiled, recognizing the truth in her daughter's words. The companionship she had found in Margaret had unlocked a new layer of her own resilience and joy. She felt seen, supported, and encouraged in ways that her solitary efforts could not have produced alone. One rainy afternoon, as they sat together knitting by the window, Margaret confided her own health anxieties, fears about aging, and past regrets. Carla listened, holding her hand, offering soft words of reassurance. She realized that sharing vulnerabilities, fears she had long carried in silence, was a powerful part of healing. Through friendship, she could both support and be supported, and this reciprocity added a richness to her life that no solo exercise routine could achieve. They laughed, they cried, and through it all, a gentle bond grew stronger, rooted in trust, empathy, and mutual care. Carla began noticing subtle shifts in her own habits as well. With Margaret by her side, she found herself exploring new forms of movement. Gentle hikes along wooded trails, short bike rides, even playful dance sessions in the living room. Each activity was infused with laughter, encouragement, and shared curiosity. She realized that friendship amplified motivation, making every step feel lighter and every challenge feel more manageable. The physical benefits were apparent: increased stamina, flexibility, and energy. Yet the emotional rewards were equally significant: a deepened sense of belonging, joy, and inner peace that permeated every part of her day. Inviting friendship into her health journey also reshaped Carla's perspective on aging. Where she had once felt isolated, wary, or limited by her years, she now saw opportunity. The companionship she nurtured with Margaret became a lens through which she could view life's challenges as shared experiences rather than solitary burdens. They exchanged tips, encouragement, and reflections, creating a network of emotional and practical support that strengthened their resolve to care for themselves holistically. Carla understood that friendship was not a distraction from her self-care, it was an essential ingredient in sustaining it. Evenings became times of reflection and gratitude. Carla and Margaret would share tea, discussing the day's achievements, mishaps, and little moments of beauty. Carla found herself documenting these moments in a journal, recording insights, laughter, and the evolving awareness of her own resilience. Each page became a testament to the power of companionship, reminding her that growth and healing were not only about physical changes, but also about the relationships and connections that sustained her along the way. The healing effect of friendship extended beyond movement and conversation. Carla noticed improvements in her sleep, reduced stress, and a lighter emotional state. Laughter with Margaret seemed to ease tension she hadn't realized she carried in her shoulders and back. The emotional nourishment complemented the physical activity, creating a synergy that revitalized her whole being. Each morning walk, each Tai Chi session, each quiet tea time conversation was a reminder that friendship could be as restorative as any supplement or exercise routine. Carla began extending her social circle gradually, inviting other neighbors and friends to join gentle walks or small group activities. She realized that the joy she found with Margaret could multiply, creating a community of care and encouragement. Even brief interactions, a shared smile, a wave, or a few encouraging words, added layers of connection that enhanced her overall well-being. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the simple yet transformative power of human connection, understanding that friendship, Laughter and mutual support were vital components of her ongoing journey. As she reflected one quiet evening, Carla realized how much she had grown. She had begun with solitary walks to nurture her body, yet the journey had blossomed into a holistic transformation that intertwined physical health with emotional well-being. Friendship had become a catalyst for change, turning routine activities into shared experiences and everyday moments into lasting memories. She understood now that caring for herself was inseparable from cultivating meaningful relationships, both essential elements in living a full, vibrant life. Carla drifted to sleep that night, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Her body felt stronger, her mind more at ease, and her heart fuller than it had in years. The journey toward wellness was no longer a solitary path, but a shared adventure, one that celebrated presence, laughter, and the profound comfort of companionship. She was reminded that life at any age could be enriched through connection, empathy, and the gentle joy of friendship, an enduring source of healing, resilience, and hope. Carla had always thought of food as a necessary part of life, something to fill her stomach and keep her going, but she had never truly considered it as a source of vitality and emotional comfort. After weeks of walking with Margaret, practicing Tai Chi, and sharing laughter, she began noticing subtle changes in her body. More energy, lighter joints, and a clarity of mind she hadn't experienced in years. It was as if her body was asking for more than exercise. It craved nourishment that could support this newfound momentum. One quiet morning, she stood in her kitchen, examining the shelves lined with canned goods, pastas, and familiar snacks. Something inside her shifted, a gentle realization that she had been overlooking a crucial part of her wellness journey, the everyday choices of what she ate. That day, Carla began experimenting with simple meals made from fresh, vibrant ingredients. She peeled bright carrots and red bell peppers, chopped green beans and zucchini, and arranged them into a colorful salad that almost glowed in the sunlight streaming through the window. As she mixed in a handful of almonds, drizzled olive oil, and sprinkled a pinch of herbs, she felt a subtle excitement, a quiet pride in preparing something that could nourish her from the inside out. Sitting down to eat, she noticed the difference immediately, not just in flavor, but in how her body seemed to respond. Each bite felt deliberate, mindful, and comforting. It was as though she were rediscovering a dialogue with her own body, learning what it truly needed. Carla shared these meals with Margaret whenever possible. Their conversations over lunch or dinner became gentle lessons in observing how food affected their energy, moods, and overall sense of well-being. Margaret would comment on how her hands felt less stiff or how she slept more soundly, while Carla noticed improvements in her digestion and a renewed sense of balance in her day. They began to explore simple ways to integrate more plant-based foods, fiber, and lean proteins, swapping recipes, experimenting with spices, and discovering the joy of preparing meals together. This companionship transformed nutrition from a task into a shared ritual, where the process of preparing and savoring meals was as restorative as the food itself. The journey also taught Carla about listening to her body's signals. She learned to pause before meals, noticing the subtle cues of hunger, fullness, and satisfaction. Snacks became intentional rather than mindless. Instead of reaching for cookies or chips out of habit, she would savor a small bowl of blueberries or a handful of walnuts, delighting in the textures, colors, and natural sweetness. These small acts of mindfulness extended beyond food. They seeped into her walks, her Tai Chi practice, and even her conversations with Margaret. Eating became a meditative moment, a way to honor the progress she had made and reinforce the changes she had embraced in her body and mind. Carla also became aware of the importance of hydration. She began carrying a water bottle wherever she went, sipping slowly throughout the day. The ritual of drinking water was soothing and grounding, a simple yet powerful reminder that caring for herself involved small, consistent actions. Tea became another companion, particularly herbal blends that supported relaxation and digestion. She discovered that the simple act of brewing a cup of chamomile or peppermint tea, inhaling its aroma and sipping it slowly, could shift her mood, calm her thoughts, and prepare her for a restful evening. Nutrition, she realized, wasn't just about what she ate. It was about the way she engaged with every aspect of sustenance. As weeks passed, Carla noticed tangible improvements. Her mornings felt lighter, her walks longer and more comfortable. She no longer relied on caffeine or sugar to boost energy because the combination of wholesome food and hydration sustained her naturally. Even small aches she had once endured without thought seemed diminished, replaced with a sense of balance and vitality. Carla reflected on how deeply food affected her life, not just physically, but emotionally, socially, and spiritually. Each meal became an opportunity to nourish her body, connect with Margaret, and reinforce the new habits that had reshaped her world. Carla's daughter, Sophie, was quick to notice these changes as well. When she visited, she found her mother enthusiastically preparing a vibrant salad or simmering a hearty soup, the kitchen filled with aromas that seemed to radiate warmth. "Mom, it smells amazing in here," Sophie exclaimed one afternoon. Carla smiled, her heart full, and invited her daughter to join the ritual. Sophie sampled a few bites, her eyes widening at the freshness and care evident in every dish. Conversations flowed naturally around the table, and Carla realized that her approach to food had become a bridge, not only to her own health, but to strengthening family bonds. Over time, Carla experimented with variety and balance. She learned to rotate vegetables, grains, and proteins, discovering new flavors and textures that made each meal exciting. She explored legumes, nuts, and seeds, incorporating them seamlessly into soups, salads, and morning oatmeal. Her body responded positively. Her energy surged, her digestion improved, and even her mood stabilized. Carla marveled at the way small, consistent changes could ripple through every part of her life. She understood that nutrition, when approached with intention and care, became a powerful partner in her ongoing journey toward wellness. Carla also learned to embrace flexibility. While she prioritized nourishing meals, she allowed herself occasional indulgences, a square of dark chocolate, a piece of homemade pie, without guilt. She recognized that food should bring pleasure as well as sustenance, and that balance, rather than restriction, was essential to maintaining a healthy relationship with what she ate. This mindset eased anxiety and strengthened her commitment to long-term wellness. Meals became moments of celebration, creativity, and connection, reinforcing the harmony between body, mind, and spirit. Evenings were particularly sacred in Carla's nutritional routine. She often prepared a light, balanced dinner, taking time to enjoy it slowly, reflecting on the day's experiences, and appreciating the journey she was on. These meals were quiet moments of introspection, a way to honor herself and the progress she had made. Sometimes Margaret joined, sometimes she dined alone, but the intention remained constant: nourishment with mindfulness, care, and gratitude. Carla realized that nutrition had become more than fuel. It was a ritual, a practice, and a source of empowerment that enriched every aspect of her life. Through this journey, Carla discovered that food could transform more than her body. It could reshape her mindset, her habits, and her relationships. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the meals she prepared, the company she shared, and the energy she cultivated. Nutrition had evolved from a routine necessity into a daily celebration of life, a tangible expression of self-love, and a bridge to connection with those she cherished. Carla understood with quiet clarity that caring for herself through food was an act of profound respect for her body, her heart, and her future. With each nourishing bite, Carla felt more alive, more connected, and more capable of embracing life fully. The simple acts of chopping vegetables, brewing tea, and sharing meals had become a ritual that intertwined health, joy, and companionship seamlessly. Nutrition had become her ally, her teacher, and her daily reminder that wellness is holistic, subtle, and achievable in even the smallest choices. Carla felt prepared to continue this journey, confident in the knowledge that each mindful meal strengthened not only her body but also her spirit, cultivating a life of vitality, joy, and lasting resilience. Life, Carla soon realized, had a way of testing the very foundation she had been rebuilding. One crisp morning, she awoke with an unusual heaviness in her chest and a subtle dizziness that refused to subside. At first, she dismissed it as fatigue, thinking perhaps she had pushed herself too hard on her early morning walk. But as the day progressed, the sensation intensified, settling into an uncomfortable rhythm that made her pause mid-step when trying to reach for a glass of water. Carla's confidence, so carefully nurtured over the past months, wavered, replaced by a flicker of fear she had not felt since her first health scare months ago. She called Margaret immediately, her voice trembling just slightly as she explained her symptoms. Margaret's tone was calm, compassionate, yet firm. "Carla, you need to get checked. Don't wait." That evening, Carla found herself sitting in a small, softly lit examination room, waiting for the doctor to return with the results. She tried to focus on the rhythmic ticking of the clock, the quiet hum of the air conditioning, anything to keep panic at bay. Her mind replayed the last year of her life, the walks, the nutritious meals, the laughter and companionship. Was it all slipping away in a single, unanticipated moment? When the doctor finally entered, Carla braced herself for bad news, her hands gripping the edge of the chair, knuckles pale. Yet the doctor's expression, while serious, carried a calm authority that immediately eased her racing thoughts. "Carla," he began gently, "what you are experiencing is a minor heart rhythm irregularity. It's not uncommon at your age, and it's manageable. We need to monitor it, adjust a few lifestyle factors, and it should stabilize." Relief and anxiety collided in her chest. Relief that it was not immediately life-threatening, but anxiety at the reminder that the body, no matter how nurtured, could still present unexpected challenges. That evening, Carla walked home slowly, each step deliberate. The crisp air filled her lungs, and she allowed herself to reflect on the fragility and resilience of the human body. It was a reminder that progress was not linear, that setbacks could appear even when she had been diligent, mindful, and consistent in her wellness journey. Rather than despair, she chose introspection. She revisited her nutrition, hydration, and movement habits, evaluating what she could adjust without compromising the balance she had cultivated. Carla realized that setbacks were not failures. They were signals, opportunities to recalibrate and deepen her understanding of her body. She shared the news with Margaret, who listened attentively and then offered a gentle perspective. "Carla, this is part of the journey. Remember how far you've come. You have the tools, the habits, and the mindset to navigate this." That conversation, brief as it was, became a lifeline for Carla. It reminded her that she was not alone in facing the uncertainties of aging. Support, compassion, and practical knowledge formed a buffer against fear, transforming what could have been a moment of panic into an opportunity for resilience and growth. Over the next several days, Carla implemented small, careful adjustments. She modified her walking routine to include brief rests, ensuring her heart felt supported. She focused on calming practices such as gentle stretching and deep breathing exercises, which helped stabilize her pulse and ease anxiety. Meals became even more intentional, with attention to ingredients that supported cardiovascular health: fresh greens, omega-rich fish, nuts, and whole grains. Carla discovered that by integrating these choices naturally into her routine, she could respond proactively without feeling restricted or deprived. Sleep, Carla noticed, became a focal point in managing this setback. Nights that once had been disrupted now required an extra layer of mindfulness. She adjusted her evening routine to include herbal teas, light stretches, and a moment of reflection before bed. The act of acknowledging her body's signals, rather than ignoring them, allowed her to enter rest more fully. Dreams felt calmer, and mornings arrived with a subtle sense of steadiness she hadn't anticipated. Sleep, she realized, was not just a passive recovery, it was an active, conscious practice intertwined with her daily choices and awareness. Family support also played a crucial role. Carla's daughter Sophie became more involved, checking in frequently, bringing home freshly prepared meals, and sharing encouraging words. Carla felt gratitude swell each time Sophie praised the vibrancy and creativity of her kitchen rituals. Even friends who had once seen her struggle now marveled at her resilience. Their encouragement was not superficial. It was a recognition of the courage it took to navigate unexpected challenges while maintaining dignity, joy, and self-care. Carla began to understand that setbacks were not isolating. They could actually strengthen connections and foster empathy. Mentally, Carla confronted fears she had long tucked away. Thoughts about mortality, health limitations, and the unpredictability of the body surfaced, but rather than succumbing, she addressed them with compassion. Journaling became a tool, a private conversation with herself where she could express doubts, hopes, and intentions. Writing allowed her to observe patterns in her thoughts, recognize triggers for anxiety, and create strategies for coping. This practice, combined with the mindfulness cultivated during her walks and meal preparations, provided an inner stability that was crucial as she navigated this unexpected chapter. Carla also reflected on the role of community in her journey. She attended a local support group for seniors managing heart health, where she listened to stories similar to hers. She shared her experiences cautiously at first, then more openly as she recognized the value of mutual encouragement. The group became a mirror, showing her that challenges were universal and that solutions could be practical, consistent, and human-centered. Carla left each meeting with renewed perspective, a gentle reminder that she was part of a continuum, not isolated in her struggle. Gradually, the irregularity in her heartbeat stabilized, aided by consistent monitoring, attentive care, and the lifestyle adjustments she had integrated seamlessly into her daily rhythm. Carla felt gratitude for the small victories, the evenings of restful sleep, the walks completed without discomfort, the meals enjoyed with attention and joy. Each moment reinforced that resilience was not about perfection, it was about adaptation, presence, and persistence. She came to view setbacks as invitations to deepen her engagement with life, rather than interruptions to her progress. By the end of this chapter in her journey, Carla had internalized a profound lesson. Health was an ongoing conversation with her body, not a static achievement. She had learned to listen, respond, and adjust with compassion and practicality. The setback had tested her resolve, but it also revealed her capacity for growth, patience, and self-awareness. Carla realized that true wellness encompassed not just the triumphs, but the challenges, and that navigating the unexpected with grace was itself a form of victory. Carla's story, rich with transformation, resilience, and daily mindfulness, became a testament to the human spirit's capacity to adapt. She had confronted fear, uncertainty, and physical limitations and emerged with a deeper understanding of herself and the intricate dance between body, mind, and lifestyle. With the unwavering support of friends, family, and mindful practices, Carla felt prepared to continue her journey, ready to embrace whatever came next with awareness, care, and the quiet confidence that she could navigate life's unexpected twists with grace and courage. Months had passed since Carla's last setback, and she could feel a rhythm returning not just in her body, but in her daily life. Each morning, she woke with a sense of anticipation rather than dread, appreciating the sunlight filtering through her curtains, the soft creak of her wooden floor, and the aroma of coffee brewing in the kitchen. What had once seemed ordinary now felt rich with meaning, a testament to her journey and the resilience she had cultivated. Carla's reflection in the mirror no longer sparked worry. Instead, she saw vitality, strength, and a quiet pride that radiated from her eyes. Her daily walks had become a cherished ritual. She greeted neighbors with genuine smiles, exchanged small pleasantries with the local grocer, and allowed herself to pause at the park to watch children play or birds flit between trees. Movement, once simply a task to maintain health, had transformed into a meditative experience, a way to honor her body and celebrate its abilities. Carla noticed the subtle improvements in her balance, her energy, and even her posture, and each small gain felt like a reward for the care she had devoted to herself. Meals, too, had become a source of joy and creativity. Carla no longer viewed her food as a prescription or restriction. It was an invitation to explore flavors, colors, and textures that nourished her body and delighted her senses. She experimented with new recipes, incorporating fresh vegetables, lean proteins, and wholesome grains in ways that satisfied both her taste and her wellness goals. Sharing these meals with family and friends deepened connections, creating moments of laughter, conversation, and gratitude. The kitchen, once a place of routine, had become a sanctuary where nourishment and joy intertwined seamlessly. Carla also embraced hobbies she had long neglected. Her love for painting returned, not as a disciplined practice, but as a form of expression and relaxation. She would spend afternoons with brush in hand, capturing light and shadow in ways that mirrored her journey, delicate, patient, and mindful. Music filled her home once more, with soft, classical melodies drifting through the rooms, echoing the rhythms of her heart and the gentle cadence of her renewed life. Creativity became a mirror for her inner transformation, a reflection of resilience, balance, and the joy of presence. Family remained central to her experience. Carla noticed how relationships deepened as she shared her story openly, celebrating not only her achievements but the lessons learned from challenges. Sophie, ever attentive, remarked on the glow of confidence and peace in her mother, while friends expressed admiration for the dedication and grace with which she had navigated uncertainty. Carla realized that joy was amplified when shared, and that her personal journey of health and awareness had ripple effects, inspiring those around her to reflect on their own habits and choices. Carla's evenings became sacred moments of reflection and gratitude. She would sit by the window, a warm cup of herbal tea in hand, watching the sky shift from gold to deep indigo. In these quiet hours, she acknowledged the path she had walked, the struggles, the small victories, and the lessons etched into each day. The irregular heart rhythms, the restless nights, the moments of fear and doubt, they were no longer burdens but markers of growth, resilience, and adaptability. Carla had learned to embrace life fully, not merely survive it, and that awareness of her body and mind had transformed routine into ritual. Mindfulness had become a constant companion. Carla noticed that she approached challenges with a calm curiosity rather than immediate panic, observing her thoughts and emotions with gentle attention. Even minor aches or fatigue were met with reflection rather than alarm as she assessed how to respond without judgment. This practice of self-awareness extended beyond physical health. It touched her interactions, her decisions, and her perception of time itself. Life felt fuller, richer, and more textured, with each moment appreciated rather than taken for granted. The community that had supported Carla through her journey remained integral to her experience. She volunteered occasionally at a local senior center, sharing her story in a way that encouraged others to take small, consistent steps toward wellness. Her narrative was not prescriptive, but illustrative, offering hope and perspective through lived experience. In seeing others inspired, Carla recognized the value of connection and shared resilience. Health, she understood, was not solely personal, it was relational, nurtured through interaction, empathy, and shared encouragement. Carla's reflections often turned inward, considering the interplay between her habits, emotions, and health outcomes. She marveled at how intentionality had become a lens through which she viewed daily life. A morning walk was not just exercise, it was gratitude. A balanced meal was not just nutrition, it was self-respect. A deep conversation with a friend was not just socialization, it was nourishment for the heart and soul. This perspective imbued even ordinary moments with significance, transforming routine into a series of intentional acts that reinforced well-being. Health had become a holistic experience. Carla no longer measured success solely by clinical markers or the absence of discomfort. Instead, she embraced the fullness of vitality, emotional stability, mental clarity, physical capability, and social engagement. She recognized that setbacks were inevitable but no longer defining, that each challenge carried wisdom and opportunity. Her previous anxieties about aging were tempered by a sense of agency, a knowledge that her choices, awareness, and daily practices shaped her quality of life. Carla also learned to celebrate imperfection. Not every day unfolded flawlessly, and some moments were tinged with fatigue, irritation, or disappointment. Yet these moments were no longer catastrophes, but natural variations in the rhythm of life. She approached them with patience and self-compassion, understanding that resilience was a process rather than a fixed state. By allowing herself grace, Carla cultivated a profound sense of ease, one that permeated her interactions, decisions, and inner dialogue. Gratitude became the lens through which Carla viewed each day. She maintained a simple journal, noting moments of joy, progress, and connection. Whether it was a shared laugh over breakfast, the soft warmth of sunlight on her face, or the peaceful completion of a mindful walk, she captured the textures of her lived experience. Gratitude reinforced awareness, turning ordinary moments into anchors of joy, presence, and intentional living. As the season shifted, Carla observed the beauty in change itself. Leaves turned golden and then fell, winds shifted, and skies transformed. These natural cycles mirrored her own journey: progress, challenge, adaptation, and renewal. Carla embraced each stage with openness, understanding that vitality was not about stasis, but harmony with life's rhythms. She felt a profound sense of contentment, a recognition that her journey had prepared her to meet each day with presence, awareness, and joy. Finally, Carla reflected on her journey not as a series of challenges or triumphs, but as an integrated narrative of resilience, learning, and growth. She had